Yo, what's up friends? Welcome back to my channel, Angel in Tech. Today we're going to do something different. I'm going to try and do Python interview coding questions at least once a week, explain my thought process, tell you how I did it, how I approached the problem, and we'll just do a couple, maybe 2 or 3 per video and see how that goes. But today we're going to focus on FizzBuzz and defanging IP addresses. Now, these two are common interview questions. FizzBuzz mainly throughout all coding interviews, and then defanging IP addresses, I've noticed it more in my data science related interviews when I do coding. Very introductory, but still really useful. But for that, we're going to get started. This video has nothing to do with my previous videos, but if you'd like to check them out, go ahead and subscribe, and yeah, let's just get right into it. Cool, so let's get started with the first question. I created a new notebook, just named it Python Interview Questions. Alright, so the first question is FizzBuzz. This is a classic and really good question for beginners and for all coders. You don't only have to solve this question in Python, you can use any of your programming languages that you know and be able to solve it. The idea is that you're given an array with different integers, and you have to figure out whether each integer is divisible by 3 or 5, and if it is, you return FizzBuzz. If it's only divisible by 3, you return fizz. If it's only divisible by 5, return buzz, else you return the number eitherwise. So I'm going to create a class. You don't have to, I just like to do it only because I'm extra and it's fun. But we can just start with creating a class called FizzBuzz. And the way I'm thinking of it is that we're gonna have, so in it we're gonna have our self object, and then we're gonna have a list of arrays. Okay, or we're not gonna have a list of arrays, but we're gonna have a number. So every time we call the object or the class FizzBuzz, we're going to pass in a number. So now what we can do with this is we're going to define self.n equal to number. So this just indicates that n is now number. And then we can initialize all the other things. So self f is equal to fizz, which is what we want to return if it's only divisible by 3. Self b equals buzz. This will return if it's divisible by 5. Self, I'm going to call this FB equals FizzBuzz if it's returned, if it's divisible by 3 and 5. And then we're going to have another one for the result. We're going to call this, and it's going to be an empty list. So this is going to contain everything between 1 and the number that's being passed. So that way we understand each thing. So I'll show you guys in a sec. So now we can work on our calculation. So def calc fb, because we want to calculate FizzBuzz. Here we're not going to pass anything. We're just going to pass in the self object because we're calling it within the class. So now what we're going to do for I in range, because we start off at 1 and then we go self n, so number plus 1. So we're going to start off at 1. And if the number passed in is 1, we're going to go from 1 to 2. So just not inclusive. 2 is not inclusive, it's just the range of 1. So now let's say we pass in 10, it's going from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, not 11. So we'll do that. And then in here, so the first thing that we want to check is that if the number is divisible by 3 and 5, that will make it easier for us, because if we check every other thing, it's going to be harder logically to look back. So if we'll call this I and then modulo 3 equals 0, so this means that if the number 6 is passed in and when it's divided by 3 has no remainder, it is divisible by 3. So that gives us a true value. And I modulo 5 equals 0. So again, going to our example, if 6, so this has to be, both of these have to be true in order for this statement to work. So we will self dot, we're going to append our self dot FB because this checks for FizzBuzz. So we're going to append, which means add. We're going to add FizzBuzz to our array of result. And then we're going to continue because we're going through a range of the numbers. So now elif, we want to check individually now. I modulo 3 is equal to 0. We're going to do self.res.append, and we're going to do self.f. Cool. And we're going to continue as well because we want to check the rest of the numbers, not just that one. Elif I modulo 5 equals 0. We're going to do self.res.append self.b. Cool. And then we will hit continue one more time, only because we want to check whether or not the next number is still divisible by 3 or 5. And lastly, our last condition is if it's not divisible by anything, well, we just append the number as it is as a string, and we're going to call this I. Cool. So now we can test this. Oh no, before that we want to return the result, so we return self.res. So just a quick explanation again, we're going through the range of the number. So if it's 15, 1 through 15, and then we check right here if that number is divisible by 3 and 5. These statements have to be true in order for FizzBuzz to be added to this empty array. And if it is, cool, we continue and move on to the next number. If the number is divisible only by 3, then we add fizz. And then we continue. If the number is only divisible by 5, we append it to a result with buzz. If none of these are true, we just add the number as a string and we return the result at the end. So now we can test this by saying for number, for num, we'll check 10, 20, and 30, just so you guys can see. Sorry. Okay, and then we're gonna instantiate the object and the class and call this FizzBuzz, and we're gonna pass in num, and then we're gonna print f calc FizzBuzz for, and then we're gonna check the number for which it's being calculated by, and then return the result, which we call FizzBuzz dot calc underscore FB, and then we want to make sure we call the function, we close it, and then we should be able to run it. So this is saying for number in 10, so we're passing in 10, and then we'll pass in 20, and then we'll pass in 30. All right, we should be able to run this. Oh, we have a takes no argument. FizzBuzz. Wait a second. Did we mess up somewhere? Class FizzBuzz number. Oh, it's because right here. Cool. There we go. Yeah. So okay, when we calculate FizzBuzz for 10, we get 1, 2, because 3 and 5 are not divisible. Fizz 3 is not divisible. Oh yeah, I think we're doing it good. Okay, so 1 and 2 is not divisible by 3 or 5. 3 is divisible by 3, so it adds fizz. 4, no, 5, yep, we find it here. 6 is divisible by 3, 7 and 8, and then 9, 10. That doesn't work, but let me show you here. So right here when we get to 15, it's divisible by both 3 and 5, so we can add FizzBuzz. If we go and check 30, so 15 and 30 both add FizzBuzz. So that's how you can calculate FizzBuzz. Like I said, this is my approach. This is how I think of it and how I thought of it, and it has worked in interviews and technical assessments. So definitely give it a try and see if you can figure out a different way to do it. I know a lot of answer keys out there are very similar, but like I said, we all have different approaches, and always good to know different things. But with that, let's move on to our next question. Our second question for this video is defining an IP address. So the problem is that you're given a valid IP address, returns defanged version, meaning that you're going to replace every period or dot with a squared bracket and a dot in the middle. The reason you would defang an IP address is to prevent the user from clicking on a malicious link. This is a very common interview question in data science that I've seen, that I've experienced, and the idea is that you are able to do some string manipulation and figure out some edge cases that are not necessarily clear to the eye. So with that, we're gonna get started similar to what we did on the first question. We're gonna create a class, and we're just gonna call this Defang IP Address. And what we're going to pass into this class is a valid IP address. So we can just make sure we initialize this stuff. So we're going to do self, and then we're going to call this IP address, and then we're going to do self.ipa equal to IP address, so that way we don't have to call IP address all the time and use that long name. And then we're going to do two other things: self dot length of IP address, and you will see why in a sec. I will explain it. And then we'll do self dot count. We'll call this actually IP dot count equals count IP address dot count dots. So what this means is that, okay, we have the length of the IP. The IP address length consists of usually 15 or less, and then we have dots. We only have 3 dots in a valid IP address. If there's more than that, then we want to return an error saying that the IP address is invalid for any of these two cases. But with that, we should be able to start with our calculation. So we could call this defang function, and we're not going to pass in anything. We're just going to use whatever is being passed into the class and call this function on what's being passed, on the parameter that's being passed in. So we can check right away. So if self.length IPA is greater than 15, or self.ip.count does not equal 3, like I said, any of these two cases, we want to return just return a statement saying invalid. So we can do this by saying oh no, not that. We want to do that error and then invalid IP address, and we can point it to the IP address so that way the user knows what the IP address looks like. Again, you don't have to do this, but I think it's good. Of course, depending on the technical assessment or how the interviewer is telling you to do it, it's all based, but this is just general information. So we can actually test this. So if everything else is good, we can just return the IP address just so we can see what this looks like. Okay, cool. Let me just grab our test case and we can go from there. Cool. So as we see, the first 3 are valid IP address, so it just returns them, but then we see the invalid IP address. So we can see that the value is 1 only because it doesn't contain what is it called, a dot. It doesn't, this is just not valid. We can also add another statement saying, like, if it's well, there's no dot, so obviously it's not a valid IP address. You can't just have 1 as your IP address. Just it's not gonna work. But we can add another statement with multiple dots. So we could do, and then test that. Yeah, invalid. Too many dots, which is exactly what we wanted. Cool. So now we can work on the other case. So we can just create a variable called defanged, and here we're going to use string manipulation. We're going to use join and split string functions that are built in. So we're going to do a bracket like this, which is exactly what we want to replace. So we're going to do this, and then we're going to join whatever is being split, which in this case we're going to call self.ipa.split, and we're going to split it on the dot, like that, and then we can close it off. So what this is saying, so self.ipa.split will split the IP addresses and into one. So we can test it out, and I can show you. We can do IP, let's see, IP addresses. We could do the first one. We'll do the split. So yeah, see here, splits 0 0 0 0 0, and then if we do dot join, so we can really test it on exactly what we want to do. So yeah, see, it joins it. It's exactly what we want to do, but we're going to do it for each IP address that we're passing in. So after we do that, we can return a statement saying, giving the user a clear description of what the defanged IP address is, and we just do that, and boom. So the defanged IP address 0.0.0.0 is 0 squared bracket 0 squared bracket 0 squared bracket 0, which is exactly what we noticed down here after we did some string manipulation, which is really awesome. So like I said, very simple, very approachable once you think about it out loud. And I know in technical assessments it's timed, and sometimes it gets very tedious and you start overthinking. I know I've done it, but that's okay. I also think it's very important that you test as you create your program. There might be some test cases that do pass and some that don't, and that's totally fine. But the fact that you're able to get some and show that you know what you're doing, or your approach is working, is totally good. Even if you don't pass the technical assessment, as long as you're showing that you're capable, sometimes is more, and that's what I personally have experienced, and it has worked. So with that, today we solved FizzBuzz, and we have solved defanging an IP address. Again, these are my approaches and how I thought about them. Of course, there's other answer keys out there that are a lot different, but like I said, everybody has their different approach, and this is mine. But I hope you guys learned something and are able to take this same approach. Not exactly the same way I'm doing it, but the idea of thinking about it out loud and looking at some test cases that are not clear to the eye, and go from there. But for that's it for this video. The link in the description that I will provide is for the interview questions for this video that you can test on your own. There will be an answer key, and then there will be a notebook that you can try on your own. I will provide a My Binder link where you can also do it on the web browser, or I will also provide a PI file so you can just download it as an executable on your computer. But yeah, definitely subscribe, like, and comment if you have any other questions, or if you have any Python interview question that you'd like me to go over and talk about my approach. Let me know in the comments, or you can @me on Twitter at IamAngelSH, and we can go from there. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a great day or night whenever you're watching. I'll see you in the next one. Dream, code, live.